Everybody, I'm here with another game. This time it's one of the master games, or as we now know, it's Alphago. Um, that's going to sound way less exciting by the time this video gets up in like a month. But still, very exciting game. It's against Kim Jiseok, very strong player, usually known for being very aggressive. We see a really interesting enclosure here. I figured... Yeah, I'm kind of choosing the games. Originally, I was going to go through them all, but there's like 60 of them now, which means that if I do 2 videos a week, it's going to be half a year to finish, which might be a bit much, especially if I want to talk about other stuff and do Q reviews and other things. So I'm kind of picking the ones that A, I understand well enough to review, B, that are interesting and not technical misreads, typically, and C, have some concept that I think is very interesting and is not well covered in Go videos so that more people can know. This kind of two-spacing enclosure is really interesting. If we look at what Go Seigen used to say, Go Seigen really disliked this enclosure because of the shoulder hit, which we see Master play a lot. In fact, I think there's only one game where Master plays the small enclosure, and we see Master, or Alpha, I don't know what to, should I say Alphago? Okay, we see Alphago. I prefer saying Alphago. Play the shoulder hit a lot against enclosures. And so Go Seigen often recommended this enclosure. And now we see Alphago playing this high enclosure. This enclosure emphasizes the center a lot more. And we used to see this in the Shin Fuseki era, where players would play high moves just to kind of reduce the potential of the star points when white has multiple star points. And that's really interesting to me, because it also comes from this older idea of territorial and territory balance and power balance. Star points don't take many points. So as black, we don't need to take as many points. We can balance out the white power with our own power. This comes from an older era of Go, like the 60s, before the 60s really, where players thought that you should basically try to maintain a balance on the two fronts, on territory and influence and development power, and then try to basically gain a small edge in both, or an edge in both somehow, and then you'll win the game. And Choyu's been known for saying in the past, Choyu's a Japanese pro from Taiwan. He's really, really strong, famous for Timigo and reading ability. But, he famously said once, like, oh, do you want to know how to... I figured out the secret to winning at Go. You just have to, have both territory and influence, which basically means you're just ahead. And then after, in the 60s, you kind of saw players like Chochi-kun and Kobayashi and Takemiya who were much more stubborn, if you want to say, and I kind of attribute that to them being students at Kitani, but that's a different story, I guess. But they are very stubborn, which means that they went all for influence, like Takemiya, or all for territory, like Chochi-kun and Kobayashi, and basically said, this is better, I'm taking this, and then dealing with your strategy later. And then that kind of is still bled on. Like, many players are still... Like, we have much better respect for the center, following Go Seigen, and into the modern era of Go, I guess. But we still see people really tend to favor one or the other, and then saying, I'm dealing with your strategy later. Instead of this kind of more balancing approach, where, hey, I'm going to get an edge on both fronts and keep my options open, and be a bit more flexible. I mean, obviously there are pros like that, but the more famous pros tend to be more skewed one way or the other. And that makes sense too for like tournament results and being very strong. It is much harder to play this way, because if you always just go for strength, even if your opponent is mitigating it a bit, you'll always have the type of board position that plays to your strength, which is really good for tournament play and professionals who need to be able to consistently rack up wins, right? It's not so great if you're trying to find the best optimal move to a certain degree, because yes, if you always play for influence and attacking, you're going to be better at finding really good attacking moves, but you might not be playing from a position that is really the best for that kind of strategy. So anyway, two space high enclosure, very rare these days. Actually, it's rare all the time, most of the time. I did see Go Seigen once say something about dealing with this opening and that he didn't like this shape. And that he suggested, hey, why don't we play this exchange and then take this corner. And if black plays something here, he says there's still enough aji here that these are good exchanges for white. I don't know if that's really true because I can't judge perfectly what the aji is here. Yes, you can push out on both sides, which will mean that you can reduce the center influence a little bit. Is that really worth that preventing this shape? I'm not so certain, but he did say that, so interesting little tidbit. Anyway, we see Kim Jiseok take an approach that's very similar to splitting the orthodox. We saw many pros play here, which makes a lot of sense because this is more influence oriented, less points oriented. So puts higher value on just minimizing the influence because the points are still available to be reduced. The corner is much thinner, so it's much easier to get the points. Again, this idea of adjusting your play slightly for the balance that your opponent is striking. Of course, modern pros do this too. I didn't mean to say that they don't. Just that they tend to be more. A lot of the very strong pros tend to favor one side more, so they'll, even if they adjust within their style, but they don't make as big adjustments. Anyway, we see the approach. We see this pincer, most severe pincer, never double approach this because black shape is too good. Basically, this is the most severe pincer because if black gets another move, black has perfect absolute shape, which means white really can only jump or play this knight's move, or this one sometimes, or the attach. 3-3 is possible too, as long as the top is not important because, again, super good shape. So this is Joseki, and black plays here, forcing white to come up. The idea is that later, black will, if I play the right, yeah, that's right. Black will initiate this ko that white has to worry about. But black doesn't want to do that right now because, as you can see, there is absolutely no ko threat on this board big enough for black to play, or just pull back, I guess. So black just defends. Very nice point. High maintains presence on the centered potential. Again, this idea of moving towards white's, we see black's moving towards white's star points. So this also reduces those potentials and reduces the center area here, which is the more important thing. Caring less about a white move here because the territory here is mitigated by the invasion at the 3-3 point. This, again, like a lot of people I see review these games and they're just like, oh, black really likes influence. It's a bot. It likes influence. It's like, no, it's not really the case. Like we see black playing low approaches at the Shamari, the Komoku point a lot. And that has totally different implications than just, hey, it likes that move because it's programmed that way or whatever. No, it's playing that because A, it has better options for local survivability, and anyway, different game. Get to it eventually. Here, helping mitigate that. Also, you notice that this shape has other potential weaknesses, like it's not really alive necessarily, so if we ever somehow block this off, this is better for attacking that group. A lot of reasons. Also, this move is super, super conservative. It's really solid, but you don't ever want to have to be answering these moves when just anytime. Also, white getting a move here still opens up the N17 Aji. So you didn't really prevent anything by playing this. Actually, this has much stronger shape in many ways. So, yeah, that's why this move, not the more conservative move. And Tenuki is kind of hard, just because this is really, really severe. Actually, probably one space back to avoid, but yeah, really severe. White defends the ko shape. Just gets rid of all the bad aji. Making this group strong means that now this area here is accessible again for white. Sorry. Whereas before, if white tries to do something here, right, there's always, like, black can just give it up, in a sense. It's actually really hard to answer. But, like, black can always just give it up, develop another area. I really can't click today. And still, you know, have this really annoying ko potential for later. Yeah, there's this thing. This is still ko. And this is, like, always has S13 to come back and separate you. So hope that you are okay with running, because now you might be isolated and you're out anyway. So yeah, so this group becoming strong means that this right side is accessible again, which means that this Shimari influence is reduced. Yep, black plays here. Basically, again, this we can think of as a strong group. Typically, don't want to play near our strong groups, so better direction, wider side, and typical approach. We could have considered approaching from this side, but if we compare the strength of these two groups, the upper is much clearly stronger, so we'd rather white move towards that group than towards the bottom group. Right, like if white answered, which white did. Right, this one, now the bottom, this corner is getting a little bit weaker. So if this case, because we made this side accessible, that means that even if black defends this side, it always is going to have some problems that could link back up here, or fall under, like you can't attack severely because the whole thing could fall under counterattack. So yeah, a little bit high level, very subtle, but typically this is better direction. White defends, and black takes the 3-3 point. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing, because it's move 19, right? It's very, very early. We played moves that emphasize the center, kind of. Why are we taking the 3-3 point, right? This opening, in many ways, looks very bizarre compared to many conventional openings. But if we follow the logic, kind of theoretical logic, then it makes sense. Basically, right now, this left side is very developable for both because the stone is here. So it's developable for black. Similarly, the bottom side is the same way. Both sides are emphasizing development. Yeah, this is high, this is low, but it's not really a big difference because in terms of center potential, this is a star point, which is going to mitigate this area or this area, no matter who plays there. So why don't we, yes, we could develop, but it's actually, any development we get is going to get offset by white answering, basically. Right? This is kind of symmetric. But the difference is, no matter which approach we play, white's going to be getting corner points. So, right, that's going to be the same no matter which side you play on. So to mitigate that, why don't we just take the corner, which is the thing that is white retains in both cases, and whatever side white takes, then we can start playing elsewhere. Black wants to play here because black wants to not have a weak group. Like you might think, oh, this wall is facing the bottom side, which it is, it's true, but actually this head of the stones is facing the upper left, which is actually a much more urgent concern because this one stone is next to two stones, so it can be attacked. So if we play something like this, for instance, this is going to fall under pressure, and as we fix this group, right, then white will come back and have nice development. We played a bunch of dominant, and white secured some extra points. So we want to take care of our weak stones first. Very fundamental Go theory. Push up. This is really critical for taking control of the center influence. At a very far glance, now we are ahead of this stone, and if we didn't play here but played something like this, then this is forcing. This is not even good shape. I don't know. Let's say we played here, right? White pushes us twice or plays the knight's move. Kind of bad shape though. Probably push. And then comes back onto the bottom. This center is harder to get into. We still have to turn. But if we turn now, white's gotten two moves elsewhere. And if we play here, like, we're starting to fall behind in access to the center. So pushing here is very big, and it's good to do it early too, because these have a shortage of liberties now, which means that it's a locally good technique as opposed to just the turn, which is a one-dimensional move. Like doing it later, here. This turn is purely just to get into the center. It's really one-dimensional. But doing it here takes advantage of the shortage of liberties. So here we can see that later black has this cut, which means that now white can't hane because of the cut potential here. And I mean, you can't do this. The corners, you're gonna lose the corner later. So it's a really good timing to make this push. White wants to not have a weak group, right? If we play here, black plays here, this whole thing is weak. And this is a really nice forcing move because it also restricts access to the center. We still have this cut potential, and maybe in the future we can, it depends. Like, it's possible we can make a larger sacrifice, right? And if we're strong enough in the center, we can cut this. So it's a good exchange. White pushes one, black pushes once here. Basically, this is to stop d2 from white from being sente. Like, if we play here, this is annoying and we have to push again. I mean, we still have to do that, but if we don't do that, like, white can play here and then not answer this later, is what I meant to say. Sorry. So if we play here, for instance, and then white plays here and we push, maybe white just plays here now. This is not as big if this is already somehow reduced a bit. So black makes this exchange, which I talked about earlier, and then plays here, which makes a nice relationship with these stones and helps aim to help these stones a bit. Now this move is not sente at all because it's miai to connect, which is really nice. Actually, this shape is better if black plays here, I think. Okay, so white takes a nice large point to use the influence, but up to here I think the game is really kind of hard, for getting more difficult for white. If we look at just points, black actually has a territory lead. White has this top side, which is roughly 10, a little more than 10, and this which is like 6. So 22 with Komi, and then whatever white gets here. This top side is at least 10. I'm just counting this space with one extra move here. And this area here is a wash because white can play endgame or black can play endgame. So that's 10, and this is like another 15 plus another 10 here, roughly. So that's already like, what, 25, 35? I had 22, and then this is not clear yet. So I think black is doing pretty well up to here, actually. Of course, white's influence is much bigger than the bottom right, and so white still has like a 12 point. I don't remember my numbers. It's just like my rough counts, but like roughly can make up those 10 points. So, but black has sente, right? My point was this game can be kind of hard for white because black has a territory lead, and it's black's move. Black comes in. Normally we think of this shape, oh, let's play here because it's an invasion, right? We're aiming at connecting under. But we play here because we're trying to aim at this peep, or we are aiming at the peep. And we're isolating K4, which means that O4 is doing more work, basically. White plays here, basically trying to settle, reducing the potential of the bottom right. But if we look at this trade, you know, white loses the center potential here that we just talked about, and black loses the corner potential. In terms of points, yeah, white gets like 4 to 5, but that's really offset by this weak group, or semi-weak group. So I think points are relatively same, but we just traded potentials. White's potential was a lot bigger than black, so I don't think this is a good trade. That being said, I don't know what white could have done differently, because if you try to attack this, you kind of get the same result, and it's not great. So, not sure. White makes a base, and black, you know, white's strong now. Black wants to help these two stones that are not strong, so we attach to white. It's very typical. So now we are making shape for ourselves. Can connect, if black gets to play there, it can connect back up. So we can also make a base on the right, can also live in the corner. White plays here, so we're probably taking the corner soon. That forcing move. Oh, no, we attack here. Because again, we still have extension and corner, so these are totally alive. And those two moves are roughly the same in terms of points. So, can play elsewhere. Pressuring this group. White needs to get out and make shape. This is very normal. But we see, hey, white's getting pushed towards a strong group, making dame, and black is on the outside, taking influence, developing potential in the center. So, seems like a good attack for black. Black lives here, making this group weaker, taking advantage of the strength we got here. This was already here, but this strength makes it harder for white to run out. Because we're not going to kill it, right, if white runs. It's the same idea, though. If white runs, it takes white... White has to get past these 3 stones in order to be safe, assuming white can't make a local life. Since white has to get past these, that means we get to attack it for longer and get extra moves that are sent against it. So we transfer our influence by just chasing. So white doesn't want to do that, and white actually is fine for now. But black defends. Black could have attacked, but now that white has played here, we just saw that, you know, this chasing leads to this, which is locally good. But hey, white has a stone here now, so, you know, this influence is not very useful. White's strong on the right, and white took points here, which are going to be bigger than whatever black can get here. Even though it looks big, like this kind of thing, white can easily just turn, like, reduce this quite a lot. You might be wondering, there's a little bit of loss because you'd have to answer this like this, or this like this, but it's not really a big deal, comparing the spaces anyway. So it's more profitable to build this area because white has reduced that potential wall. We want to transfer that back over towards the center, which will force white to live on the bottom. And then we go back and develop the center. So at this point, I think the game is... Look, I'm maybe mid to high dawn level, but this game looks really hard to me for white, because white has almost no development, and black is basically almost even on points. This is 10. This is roughly 10, so 20, and this is like 15, so 45, and another 10 here, 55, plus the center. White has 10 plus, and let's just call it 20, rounding up, right? 20, like 28. Let's say this is 10 plus 2, just to make it even, so like 30, plus Komi, 36. You know, 36 and 55, like these are really rough estimates, because like in a real game I would count more clearly, and I'm sure that they have a better sense. But white's down quite a bit to me, and black has nothing that's weak, right? That's the main thing. Sure, being down 15 points is not important if there's a weak group, because attacking a weak group you could easily make 20 points. But being down 50 points and everything black has is decently strong, and black has a ton of potential in the center, I think is a little bit of a different story. So I wasn't going to review much beyond this. We get into a little ko. It's not really a ko because it ends pretty quickly without many casualties. And white has to reduce the center, but black says, hey, I'm just going to take endgame points because I can trade my center points for endgame points elsewhere, right? So white just lost like 4 points here, and black gained like 5, so it's 10-point swing. Black makes himself solid. We get a little bit of a pushing exchange. Pushing is very good way to end the game, but bad when you're not leading. And we get an exchange here because I think white was desperate to try something, but ends up losing their group, unfortunately. And we just got a trade, but not enough for white, and game is over. White resigns. Alphago wins by a ton. Let's just call it a ton. It's huge. Like, yeah, this corner and this is roughly the same, but the scores haven't really changed from earlier. Black got this amount, white got this amount. Everything else, like, I called this a 10-point roughly trade, so like 5-point gain. I remember, if you do endgame stuff, you generally divide by half if it's Gote. Yeah, so fairly simple endgame there. Didn't want to get too much about that. I thought the earlier choices were much more interesting, and how we see the very roots of really Go theory, but that we don't typically see in a lot of games. But if we just follow Go theory, a lot of it just kind of comes through. And we see this push, which normally seems weird, but it lets black later make this extension, which is a very nice balance, which also reinforces the corner. Also not a typical shape, like you would think. Like this corner, you're leaving it early. Although you do see that in older games. This kind of technique is found. It's just not very common anymore. And then we see this trade of, like, this is a very simple strategy. We both have potential. Your potential's bigger, let's trade. And then we just see very simple Miai and a little bit of attacking theory, the chase, and then white doesn't want to run because the development to the right, so white basically takes away the profit that black would get from chasing, but then black switches the direction on the attack. In many ways, I think that's what Q2 is trying to do. I didn't think about this before now, but Q2 basically forces white to be a move away from having to run. So white has to make a choice. By playing here, white's basically saying black should go this way. If white went this way, then we see that it's a profit for black. So it's kind of a probe. If we had done something earlier, right? I'm not really sure. Maybe just jump here. Or I'm not sure what the best way is. Maybe something like this. Aiming to take these and reducing the influence. Then this and this are Miai. Or black plays here, white has to live. But this is not so big now because we already are alive and took points. Seems roughly the same, but this connection becomes really inefficient now. So maybe a little bit better for white compared to the game sequence. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed the game. I thought it was really fascinating. Especially, I like the look of this opening. It's really cool looking to me, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of theory that you can apply to your games, especially as an amateur, which basically everyone who's watching this probably is. Unless you're a pro, then thanks for watching. I don't know why you're watching me, but thanks for watching. Then we don't hear a lot of theory, and also we don't have to win as much. If you really enjoy a certain way of playing, then by all means. But this might give you an idea of a more flexible way to play that is not necessarily as common. I really enjoyed this game. I hope you enjoyed this game. I hope you learned something from it. And I will see you all next time. Bye.